Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Today, I have one of my heroes, one of now, I guess, my colleagues, I can say in a certain way. Everything that she has done with her career has blown me away step by step, and I just am blown away by her as a person, and now I'm blown away by her as an author. Now, this interview, this is for all the Beths out there. Our guest today, she is one of the Shell's Angels. She's passed the Bledel test. Her AIM screen name was Crazen Cool. She thinks pop culture as a unifier like I do. She had popular girl handwriting. She was someone who loves to feel the rain on their skin. She was voted most Christ-like at water skiing. Someone who loves a good bed soup and a great day bed. And someone who is okay with being 12th place, even though that we know she is in the top 3. A person who realizes the best Bath & Body Works scent is Cucumber Melon. American Girl catalog. She loves to live, laugh, love. Someone who shops at the Limited too, but is not limited to anything at this point anymore after the release of her new book, One in a Millennial. It comes out January 23rd. And if I can do anything, this interview is that you can go over to Amazon or your local bookstore and you order this right now, because this is something you want on your coffee table. You're going to want to read this. I swear to God. And one of the worst parts of this is, we'll talk about this. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, from the podcast Be There in 5, Kate Kennedy, welcome to the show.
Ryan, that introduction, I need you to send it to me in writing so I can better pitch myself. That was so kind. And for the love of God, thank you for reading the book. That means a lot to me. And thanks for having me.
Kate, not only did I read the book, I listened to the audiobook as I read the book. And you should see, like, I've made so many notations in this book. I'm going to continue to look through this book because it is a treasure trove of not only your life, but about how you derive meaning from these things that sometimes we're meant to feel ashamed by. And like you always say, you know, there is a lean in aspect to everything that you do that I love so much.
Yeah, you know, in like recent years, I feel like there's been more dialogue about how pop cultural interests should be perceived as just as valid as anything considered sophisticated. But when we were growing up, a lot of things associated with like mass culture were coded as like rot your brain type of activities. And when you spend all your time doing things that allegedly rot your brain, you're kind of made to feel like your interests aren't important. And I think that there's something interesting about kind of hiding and I don't know, feeling like there was an invisibility to all this stuff I love that made my inner world really rich. And even though now we honor a lot of these things like Bravo, we didn't at the time. So part of the excavation was like, allow me to honor the things the way I would now of a younger version of myself.
I know. And the thing is, I always wonder of where do we go from here? You know, you actually make the point in the book of we are a product of the time that we were born in and raised in. And a lot of us, you know, our first introduction to a lot of popular culture was through the World Wide Web. But where do kids go today? Who are the little Kate Kennedys out there? And, you know, things are coming at them so much faster than they were even for us. And I'm older than you, but I can't imagine how they're sifting through it when we were barely shaping our personas through all of this that we could get our hands on.
I think about this a lot because a lot of the reason my recall is so strong, I think is because of the longing and because of like access. I mean, information was not as plentiful and accessible when I was growing up. So therefore I was always on a fact-finding mission about like what the teenage and adult world was like. Now I don't know if I'd have that longing because I could have very easily accessed all of the answers. But I think that it was kind of like a life of doing like R&D into how other people lived because I didn't have access to that, or my parents were strict about certain media. And I don't know what it looks like today. And I cannot imagine you are meaningfully retaining and digesting information at this speed, like the turnover of trends and pop culture stories right now. I forget things as quickly as I am engaged in them.
I mean, I'm trying to learn new pop stars, you know, and trying to be like, okay, what's the difference between a Renee Rapp and what's the difference between, you know, like Sabrina
Tate
Carpenter?
McRae.
Yeah, like exactly. You're like, well, how do I keep? I want to keep up. I want to hear what the kids are hearing. But you do make this. There was a great memory in the book about, and I did this as well of switching the station at the right time when your parents came in because you were trying to watch an episode of Beavis and Butthead and having it at the right moment at the right time, which almost kind of trained you in later years when you were in your AIM messaging days and you had 4 pop-up windows messaging guys, and you would look at the reflection of the message if they responded to it or not, and you would see it in the television screen, I think.
Yes, those are kind of the details I want to take people back to not only the iconography itself, but the behavior surrounding its consumption. And I think that there were a lot of funny habits developed in the process of trying to watch TV I wasn't allowed to watch, or the rituals around what was our version of texting or social media, which was AIM, and the anxiety of like a door closing on a buddy list being comparable to somebody leaving you on red.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, really, yeah, because you do compare that later on to like dating apps and what people actually must go through. But it is this kind of wonderful walk through your memory lane, but in a way you help us understand us better. And I want to say to the audience is that I'm not ignorant to the fact that I am a male. And I want to point out that if you are a man, I think there is such great would still be such a great read. My audience is primarily female, but I got to tell you, this made me feel proud to be a pop culture lover. It made me proud to know the women I do in my life, and it actually helps me understand them a little bit better, even at this old age. When you went into writing this book, and you had such an interesting career path where you almost found yourself in the corporate world of like an actual job and structure, but then you kind of fell down almost not a rabbit hole, but this thing of making these doormats to remind you if your curling iron was on, and that went viral. And then that led to your podcast, Be There in 5, and this whole other thing and you do this very honestly in the book of like, listen, everybody tells you to follow your dreams, bet on yourself, but you actually have one of the most honest portrayals of what that actually entails and how much money you had starting out and all of that stuff. But what possessed you to actually put pen to paper for this?
Okay, well, 2 things. First, I want to address to your audience that I think it's incredible how supportive you are of this book and how much of a champion you are of women's interests. And we just love you for being like a reverse Matt Rife. Like you celebrate your audience. You don't actively alienate them.
I can't afford chin transplants, Kate. I can't afford a chin transplant. No, it's a rumor. That's not true.
Can I tell you that I had a consultation with that doctor who spread that rumor, and all I wanted was just an estimate for some light chin lipo. It was a FaceTime. I came away with being told I needed a chin implant, chin lipo, and buccal fat removal to the tune of $13,000, and that he could do the surgery as soon as the next day. From FaceTime.
Hey guys, I'm on the way over to your place right now. I've got my tools.
From FaceTime. I'm like, this. Okay, anyways, he's an interesting guy. But yeah, so I really wanted to. Part of what inspired this was feeling like a lot of the literature surrounding millennials was so comedically unfavorable, and at every turn, the headlines are about us disrupting major industries or economic sectors. We killed paper napkins. We killed the American dream. We killed the diamond. And like, it just became clickbait and fodder. And yeah. I think there's something really funny about how millennials were given such an unfavorable edit, whether it's lazy, entitled, basement dwelling, and then made fun of in headlines for all the things we killed and not our circumstances that define why we killed those things. But then we get into the 2020s and we become the laughing stock of Gen Z. And like, no matter what, it's millennials a tough edit. And I just was thinking a lot about how there's an intersection of, being a woman and feeling like I needed to cater my interests to my audience so they wouldn't be conflated with my intelligence, but also even just being a millennial and feeling like we're more defined by stereotypes than like actual experiences, and the things that make us distinct aren't really that we aren't really that like we are lazy and entitled or that we're job hoppers. It's more like, no, we were the first ones to have and thus define what it meant to curate an online persona. Like we rode the wave of like 12 seismic technological shifts while trying to figure out our own identities. Like things like AIM and WWJD, like culture and,
Yeah.
wanting to be popular instead of unique, and the sleepovers. And I think that there are things that are unique about our generation that are much more important and meaningful and transcend those stereotypes. And that was part of the exercise of just wanting to help a generation of people that feel maligned feel understood for their memories, not their shortcomings.
Yeah, you have a great line in the book. I am a real life person who is able to come to life virtually. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to act. I mean, like you laugh, but I was like, God, that's it. Like sometimes I am so uncomfortable in my own skin, and a lot of us are, and we've found these places to have our voices or to share something about ourselves. And sometimes it comes from something online or hiding behind a mic, sometimes late at night, putting your thoughts out into the ether and stuff. But I just thought that was such a great line. Also, can you explain to the audience your thoughts about daybed culture, what that meant to you, and also the pre-party before the party, and how those things shaped you and almost made more memories for you than the actual party themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to pick like icons that I feel like aren't talked about as much in terms of like a nostalgic cliche. Like we all know we loved like inflatable furniture, but like where I spent most of my time was like these twin beds masquerading as uncomfortable couches that have a back support of like an outdoor gate, and they come with trundle beds, which is like for me was the guest room of childhood. It was a very cool feature, and day beds still exist, mind you, but I felt like, I don't know, so much of life happened in and on day beds and trundle beds when I would be at sleepovers with friends who were on a similar fact-finding mission to understand themselves in the world, and we would just talk until the sun rose. And I think day beds are just funny because it's something that does two jobs, but like neither well. So it's not
you
a great
never
couch
wanted
nor a
to.
great
You
bed.
you never wanted to sleep on the daybed. That was your time to explore. Was on the daybed.
Right. It's like better than the Papazon chair at your friend's house, but like still not ideal. And then with the chapter, are we going out or going out? The chapters back in the daybed and that chapter out or out, where one talks about sleepovers and one talks about pre-games, they're kind of meant to connect in terms of how female bonding rituals shapeshift over time. And there was something so contagious and electric about the atmosphere when we were getting ready to go out at a very vulnerable and uncertain age, where many of us were chasing male validation. And one of my core adjectives to be hot and fun. I was very much a part of the mid-aughts culture where I just was problematically chasing diet culture and following these celebrities that were being exploited for their beauty and bodies, and paired with I don't know, kind of a hookup culture in this Tucker Max fratty era where I was uncomfortable going out and interacting with boys. And I just think there was something so helpful and hopeful about the time before we went out and the environment we could control before we saw the rest of the world, where all we would do is build each other up and tell each other we look so hot, and we would take pictures and we would have drinks. And it's just so interesting to me that those pre-games in hindsight were the prequel to some better event, but those are the things that I remember the most. And
Well, because
we were
like
the
you
main
said,
event.
you get to focus on each other in those times. And I thought it was interesting you talking about meeting up with your friends in Vegas, and the thing that you decided to do was stay in. That was actually the most exciting thing to do, was stay in. And you had this great line of, it's funny how old friends remind you of who you are, even though you don't identify with who you are back then anymore. And I was like, that's it exactly. It's like they remind us of who we are, but we weren't even really ourselves back then. And I thought there was something so mind blowing about that.
I think that like there's something so beautiful about the friendships created during very vulnerable times in your life when you need the support the most. And I think that I was kind of trying to tie it to, in the house, like watching Housewives, for example, how it's almost comedic when how every single scene They hug, they air kiss, and then they incessantly compliment each other's outfit
Yeah.
to a point where it's like, oh my God, can we move on? It's like, and it's maybe fake, it's maybe obligatory, but I don't think it matters. I think the ways we build each other up and support each other when we've put an effort to our appearance are really kind gestures that the thing I love about women that we do. And I don't really care if you mean it or not. I think that when I was feeling rejected, I needed that kind of support by being like, oh my God, you look so hot. He is going to curse the day he left. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah. Well, no, it's the people screaming to Kelly Clarkson, since you've been gone, I can breathe for the first time. Also, I do think it's interesting you brought up Real Housewives. You wrote at the end of the book, it's Real Housewives, the best parts never drive the plot. The art happens outside of the main arc. And I thought that's so true of life. But also the one pushback I would have is after this week's Salt Lake City finale, which you said, I felt like this, there were actual, plot points driving this plot. And the art was actually the plot point in this instance. Really quickly, if I could just get I don't even know if you could have quick thoughts on this, but since we're talking about Housewives, what did you think about the finale and Monica and the Heather of it all? It was like a game of whodunit all of a sudden.
I had goosebumps. I was floored. I rewound. It was some of the most riveting live television I've seen in years. It was outstanding. And even with like the spoilers and leaks, it still had like twists and turns and like, oh my God, the footage in Meredith Mark's store and the black
the editors
eye
came to life. Like the editors even got involved in the art. It was like top to bottom, like a piece of art.
And the things said in passing were better than entire seasons of like other franchises when nothing's going on. Like the black eye or the security cam footage like was not even worth exploring for. They just like moved right on. And there are endless things you could excavate about the episode. But Salt Lake is one of my favorite franchises. I have a weird fascination with Salt Lake and the culture of Mormonism, as you know, if you listen to my podcast. And I think that what was really artfully done is that sometimes the most grating, awful seasons of Housewives come after the fame happens and they become like self-referential, and it's about being on camera. It's about filming. The arguments are about, it's like not fun fourth wall stuff, but this was a really interesting example of like, the art happening in the main arc and the art imitating the art, because it was like a fan infiltrated the inner circle.
Yeah, by the way, it's like so many of us memers out there are like, this could be us. If we really get weird enough, we could wind up on one of these shows and be unmasked in a final episode. And I'm still like I said, I'm blown away by that information of finally admitting that Jen Shaw gave Heather the black eye. I'm like, wait, we're just going to keep going? Like, we're not going to have a referee whistle and review the play? Because that to me was mind blowing to finally get that information that we all secretly knew, but to have it said out loud I cannot wait to see the reunions.
Okay, can I tell you something that I'm interested to hear what happens behind the black eye, because I hosted a panel for Heather's book.
I saw that
last February, and it was before Bermuda, before she found out about Monica, whatever. And she told me I could ask her anything. And I did ask about the black eye. And we were having like a very candid interpersonal discussion backstage. And she was like, she's one of my favorite Bravo celebrities I've ever met. She was an absolute delight. And she told me that like she honest to God blacked out. Like, and that was like a source of kind of shame and embarrassment, having been in a person that like recently left the church. And like the thing that would really excite a member of the church still is proof that when you do things like start to drink, your life spirals out of control. And that's interesting to me, because I feel like there's something to that, of where that is maybe true, but like later on they rolled the tapes, finally showed her the footage, and Jen had something to do with it that she didn't realize. So like, I actually don't think she fully lied in that moment. I think it was a combination of a blackout and something production captured and they couldn't use.
I need a 3-part ID discovery documentary about this black guy thing now. Like, I feel like we could really hone in, like we tend to do in pop culture now, is like make that moment into some kind of 3-part docuseries. But speaking about organized religion, you actually talk about when you were a kid, being in, you had a religious phase, or you were talking about purity culture.
Hmm.
And I think what was interesting about this is the thing that started to pull you away from it was you didn't want to get up too early. It was too early because they had, like, what was it, a touch the pole ritual or something?
See you at the pole.
See you at the pole.
Yes.
What is see you at the pole?
Well, in some of the evangelical youth group worlds, there's this real like persecution complex where they want you to like publicly witness for Christ. And it is a fascinating thing, in the United States of America, where, 90% of Congress identifies as Christian, alleging that you'll be persecuted for telling your peers you're also a Christian. But it was kind of a fascinating thing where you were supposed to go to the poll first thing in the morning, and like I think you prayed, and as everybody was like walking to school, they would like see you publicly displaying your or witnessing your commitment to Christ.
So,
And
but
for me, it was the early wake up. There were a lot of things contributing to my wanting to not be a part of kind of more closed-minded, restrictive circles that were telling me how to live when I was still trying to meet myself. But I drew the line at having to wake up early. And it was just kind of a funny moment I remember of being like, all this time spent trying to like save my soul, but then like I just couldn't get out of bed.
yeah, no, I love the Oprah. It's like, these big dramatic moments in our head of like breaking free from these ties that bind us. But sometimes can be as simple as the stirring in your soul, but also just not wanting to wake up that early. I need better sleep. I thought that was such an interesting moment.
I think there's something that is part of growing up where all your behavior, your identity, it's all a function of what people tell you to do, what people tell you is right. And the older you get and you start to reconcile with how you actually feel, you slowly do things in your own best interest. And it's incredibly empowering in the smallest of ways. And I think feeling so controlled by this environment that had so many opinions about what you wore and how you spoke and how you approached relationships and whatever, it was kind of like a light bulb moment for me when my mom turned on the lamp at 7 a.m. And I was like, oh, I don't have to go. I don't have to agree with this. I don't have to subscribe. Like it's almost as silly as it sounds. It takes growing up to find your own autonomy
Yeah.
in that way and realize just because you're told to do it doesn't make it right for you.
Isn't it funny how it takes us a lifetime of learning to be ourselves? And some of us don't even really get there,
Yes.
But it's like every
Yes.
year, it's like learning these things of like, oh my gosh, that's so simple, but it didn't take flight in my head at all. And there were so many moments in your books where I was just like, in your book, where I was just kind of blown away by that notion, and how you to this day are still discovering yourself year after year. You're somebody that I imagine, and you talk about, doing some of your best work on the floor, sitting there dreaming, but also realizing that when we were kids, we had this unabashed free time between Friday and Sunday, this 36 to 48 hour period where we could find out who we are, and we could deep dive these mysteries of pop culture that we could get our hands on. But as we grow older, we don't have that time anymore. It's even harder, like you point out, to make friends. How do you stay daydreaming as an adult?
I know. And truly, I think that one of the greatest privileges I could have been given having, with my parents giving me a great childhood is that it gave me the mental real estate to explore and to dream and to not worry about things that I wasn't ready for. And that's something I'm genuinely nostalgic for, is just having time to kill. And I think that that's why probably you and I love our job so much, is because we were able to carve out an occupation that still allows us that space for exploration. And I think that what I love about content like yours is that it provides people a way to do that without their own cognitive labor. Like, I'll do the
Yes, yeah.
exploring for you if you'll
Yeah,
listen
yeah,
to
yeah.
me talk.
Oh my god! Also, like that was the best thing in the world was having you come on. So I had to read. Like I was forced to read this book because, like it's like I had seen this book now. I heard about this book for like a year or something, and I was like, that would be right. That's my jam. That's my jam. And then to have it be like, okay, here's the interview date. Here's the book. I was like, yes, because my mind, left to its own devices, will sit and stare at the wall and think about the Twilight franchise and things like that. But like, it's like, and then it's like you're on this kind of beautiful vacation in your mind that you can like pick pieces apart, add your own story to it, learn more about yourself. And I was like, this is heaven, you guys. Like it's a different version of like a Chuck Klosterman. It's a different version of all like there's so many things that I just truly love about this book. And I also want to give a shout out to the audiobook, which Kate reads. And I don't want to embarrass you at all, but there are a couple moments when you can tell the emotion in Kate's voice, and it got me. Like there was a time when she had met her husband, and I'll tear up right now thinking about it. I just love when I can hear how much it means to somebody, and I'll listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I sometimes think that is one of the things that I dislike is sometimes I can't tell if they feel something about what they're reading or not. And I know this is your own life, but I thought that was so beautiful. Was there any pause in leaving that kind of stuff in the audiobook version of this?
Honestly, the reason I left it was because of Jessica Simpson's audiobook. I don't know if you listened to
I
her
did. Open
memoir.
book. Yes, I did.
Yes, I thought it was really beautiful and powerful that she spoke with such conviction at times, such emotion at times, and that I don't know, I felt like she prioritized being a person over being a narrator, and it just stuck with me. And so going into the audiobook recording, I was like, I hadn't read the book in a long time, and I was like, I'm just going to like let myself feel feelings. And beyond that, I recorded the audiobook days before I gave birth. I was heavily, heavily pregnant. And the book is written very much from a childless version of me. And toward the end, I kind of come to my own conclusion about this book being having a weird secondary function of an exploration of my own identity. Because as a 35-year-old woman, you have a lot of thoughts when you hit your, fertility cliff, as they call it, and you're not sure what your next steps are. And, you kind of hear everybody around you say they forget their life before they had kids, or that, their kid taught them nothing else matters. And I was kind of like, well, what if I want all this to matter? This book was kind of like my, as I like to say, my, verbal mansplaining of all the things I always wished I could identify with, or manspreading rather, of all the things I wished I could identify with, but never felt like it was appropriate. And then only to be at the age where I felt like most defined by if I was going to become a mom or not. And anyway, it was very emotional for me to read my words written from such a different place, and to know I was like about to give birth and my life was going to completely change. And it was very poetic to me to get it all out there about who I was and the things I wanted to celebrate before my life was about to become who I was to somebody else, their mom.
Yeah.
And this was just me.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, you guys, if you follow Kate, you already know she does have a baby. She is a mother now, and she did write this book and has one of the best addendums that I've ever read in a book ever. It was at the very end when you reveal, and I love it that you were writing or 2 weeks before the due date of this book, and you didn't even realize you were with child. And I thought that was so amazing because we go through a very personal journey in the book about your pregnancy journey and all of these thoughts that you're having. There was one thing that stuck out to me was I think you were at like a wedding reception or something, and you were waiting for one of those like drinks with like 12 ingredients in it that takes too long.
Signature cocktail.
Yeah, signature cocktail.
No. Signature cocktails when there's a long line are simply inefficient, and we really need to resist.
But it gave you the time to talk to this lady who had a child, and you were like, it was very interesting. And I think in retrospect, what was interesting hearing you talk about that lady of like, stopping and thinking about what she was going through, about how hard her life must have been at that moment. And then listening to you speak about whether or not you potentially would want to have a child or not. And I thought that was such an interesting thought about life, how we're all on these different journeys and we kind of try to have to meet each other where we're at. And we don't have a lot of empathy anymore in this world. So I found that such an interesting moment of you actually being cognizant of potentially what this lady was going through, talking to you about your journey.
I think that's part of the theme of friendship and female bonding, and how, when we're sleepover age or when we were pre-game age, we were in very similar life phases and could deeply relate to one another. But the weird thing about womanhood is how your choices and chances really fragment your lived experiences in ways that, when you're trying to understand what somebody else is going through, it often sounds like commentary on their decisions. And when when trying to figure out if I wanted kids or not, the way people would talk to me about it, I would feel like they were criticizing me. But now I see that, like, they were going through some stuff themselves that they couldn't really understand. And I think that, that anecdote was about this person that, in hindsight, I'm like, I think she was really struggling to feel as fulfilled by motherhood as she had always hoped. And in kind of nagging me about if I wanted kids or not and who will take care of me when I'm older and all these things, she was kind of going through all of her reasons she had kids. And I think that we were just, I don't know. It's interesting to think of how often those conversations are had where both people leave kind of feeling off put by the other.
Yeah.
When I think that the thing we share is that life often is a disconnect from our expectations. And just as I might have thought I would have kids by then, she might have thought motherhood would fulfill her in ways that she had always hoped by then. And really, what we're both navigating is that life is not as simple and formulaic as we thought. And there might be more in store for us than wife and mother.
Yeah, exactly. And life isn't as simple as watching Full House on Friday nights, of being able to watch or Snick on Saturdays, and, these kind of 22-minute consumer little bubbles to push soap. Life is actually a little sloppier, a little dirtier. And only in retrospect are we sometimes able to actually think about what these moments made. But in the moment, they can seem off-putting, but they'll stick with you. And I think that sometimes is exciting. And I know it's a small part of the book, but that stood out to me. Also, Kate, could you tell the listeners what is your definition of cool and what is your definition of popular?
Oh, it's funny, right? I gotta read this book.
You're like. By the way, Kate, if I haven't sold you a copy of your own book by now, I do not. I'm doing something wrong.
I'm sure you can relate. As a person that creates for a living, I'm so heavily critical of my work. I did not read this book any more than I absolutely had to, because then you start to cut things and go crazy and second guess. And anyway, so it's hard for me to read it because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, there's so much I would change. But okay, that's from, the Popular Girl handwriting chapter. I think this is an important distinction because in pop culture, popularity was positioned as kind of the mean girl, the rich girl, the sexually active girl, the party animal. In real life, popularity, there's two kinds of popularity: status-based popularity of things that give you status versus things that make you likable and have a lot of friends. Like, popular can mean you literally have a big network because you have such strong social skills and everybody really likes you. Or popular can mean you possess certain status symbols that people find desirable, not that, you yourself are like friendly or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that media portrayed popular girls as cool, and cool means like it implies a level of admiration, and popular to me implies a level of like relatability and friendliness. Like, you're cool if you party, like sex, drugs, rock and roll, you have the cool clothes, you have the biggest house, you throw the parties. Like, I think that that's kind of distinct from popular, which in my school was more like involved, friendly, class officer. And I think that sort of popularity isn't talked about enough or represented in media, where it's not that popularity becomes irrelevant the older we get. It's that status symbols shapeshift over time, and you can't tie your identity to them, because once they're over, so is your entire self-worth.
Yeah.
But exercising the things that make you likable and able to relate to people is a type of popularity like we should carry through life, and it's not a shallow pursuit to want to be popular.
No, I mean, not at all. I mean, that made complete sense to me. Also, it cracked me up though in researching this book. Your mom was helping out with all of these memory boxes that she had, and going through the memory boxes, Kate discovered that potentially she was average at a lot of things. That she, that she was like she was, I really thought going into that, reading that it was going to be like, oh, award after award, and you're arguing against that, saying, listen, I got like a participation trophy. There's something in here that mom was like, wow, over like some soccer kick or something. It was you were like, wow, the acceptance that I was average, but I was still so loved and still always championed and supported to do whatever I did. And I thought, we don't hear that enough either.
I thought that one of the working titles for that chapter was honorable mention at all. Because
and then Bethany ruined it. She's a reality reckoning. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think whenever I hear, I think anytime you're in an unconventional career, people ask you like the key to your success, whether that's like a way you self-identify or not. And when I did like the doormats and, the podcast and got into like the space of commentary and it was kind of unconventional, people were always like, how'd you do it? And it wasn't because of my excellence. It was because of being so average. I'm not afraid to try things because I don't expect excellence. And I'm just not a person that got straight A's or got awards or got acknowledged at every turn. Like, I'm a person that was like allowed to get B's and allowed to quit. And I think that in being allowed to quit, I got to explore so many different sides of myself that were valuable. And I just wanted to like encourage people to not be like so hard on their kids about the metrics, because there's so much value in effort over excellence. And I just really appreciate my parents for that. I think the key to my success is really not having much experience with greatness.
I mean, like, that is one of the best things I ever read because I didn't expect to read it. Like, whenever I sometimes approach things that involve you, I think of excellence to a degree. I think of, like, I always tell you, I remember coming down to San Diego to watch one of your live shows, and I just saw how this audience was there, and they were all such special people that loved, Taylor Swift and all of these pop, you could tell these were like they were just amazing people, and you were there, and it wasn't like you were like, look at me, but it was like part of this larger group. And I just remember thinking, what a special time and what a special person that was able to harness this to like kind of show us that there is a place for all of us. And so sometimes when I'll listen to your podcast, I just think like, well, this person had to have gotten the straightest A's that you've ever gotten in school. Yeah. This person knows how to make any kind of document that you could want to make. So it was so interesting. It was so interesting to read that. I found that fascinating. Also, I wanted to mention before, as we start winding down here, you're very honest also about mental health. And I thought you were very open about your own mental health, and also something that I talk about it a lot on the show, but you kind of explain it perfectly of, you can, you sometimes the feel good moments, but sometimes you can appreciate those feel good moments and you love those, but sometimes you don't feel good. And I thought it was such a easy way, simple way to put that, which is so meaningful to me. Is it's like, yeah, I love good memories and good moments, but sometimes I just don't feel good.
Yeah, I think that when if I wanted to analyze my interest in nostalgia, I think part of it is that I do have trouble holding on to good feelings in the moment. And sometimes I'm able to really value things in hindsight that I wish I could have been more present for. And in recounting a lot of this book, it was interesting because I didn't even know that I had a propensity for depression until I was like deep in my 20s. I didn't know that there were signs of like my melancholic disposition throughout my entire life. And I think a big theme of this book is like, because I skew a bit sad, a lot of times my company was the media I was consuming when I was going through something. And it kind of scored my existence and kept me afloat. And I don't think I really realized that role of pop culture in my life until I was writing about it, and like kind of the companionship it provided. And beyond that, I think that the pop culture we grew up with about mental health was really extreme and undignified. From Girl Interrupted to A Beautiful Mind, it depicted mental health issues in a way that didn't really show the spectrum of it. And I think a big problem with not having more discourse about mental health, as millennials, when we grew up like Gen Z has now, is that I wasn't really taught to distinguish butterflies from an anxiety disorder, normal nervousness or normal sad feelings from something clinically wrong.
Yeah.
I thought, well, if I had mental health issues, I'd be institutionalized. And I
Yeah.
didn't take it seriously. And then what that does is makes you read too much self-help and then blame yourself for all your problems, when sometimes it's really not your fault. And it's not fair to suggest that people are depressed because they're not trying hard enough. And I think that realization of like this, even though I have a good life and I have no reason to be sad, it's okay that I am, and I still deserve to, get help and work through it and not beat myself up that I can't just be happier.
Oh, it blew my mind when I found out you can actually do things about this, or you can actually take something to potentially help certain receptors in your brain that you were born with. Like I always just thought, oh, luck of the draw, right? Like this is, and you point
Right.
out, and this is, I used to sit in my room and listen to The Blower's Daughter by Damien Rice over and over and over. I mean, that Anna Begins by Counting Crow. Like, I have a sad bastard playlist. I mean, you brought up even the Garden State soundtrack in this book, and there's some really good sad ones on there as well. But it was just one of those things that I was so used to feeling blue that I thought that was one of the only feelings that I was good at,
In the art you consume, like, you have this dynamic inner world nobody knows about, and you listen to stuff like Damien Rice because it makes you feel understood. And looking back, it's a comedic level of intensity and drama for, like, being friend zoned or something, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's why these things are so important. And I love that you brought up Damien Rice, because I think it's like that, and like Cannonball is just the perfect example of like the internal drama being so real to you that you're effectively scoring the soundtrack to your own emotion.
Yeah. Like I would have the thing where I would have the playlist to go and cry in my car to. Drive around and cry to. Like, it was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. Like, it was like a scheduled in drive where and if I didn't cry, if I didn't hit me in the feels, I felt like I was then doing something wrong in my own sadness. How insane is that? That's insane.
I know, but I think that it gave you permission to feel feelings that you maybe weren't expressing to the people in your immediate life. And it's like, well, thank God somebody out there who's like, successful and well-respected experiences these things too, because none of my friends seem to be nearly as sad as I am.
I know. It's like, look at the breadth of emotion that I can express through my music and my personality. Also, I just thought one of the closing chapters, you bring up the Spice Girls. They didn't even pick out their own monikers. This is the first time I heard this. It was actually, you discovered from an article, like Top of the Pops. They actually, this author gave them the monikers of Scary Spice, Posh Spice. And I thought that was so weirdly brilliant in retrospect, because a lot of women like yourselves, or like you attributed girl power to them, yet they didn't even choose their own names that they were used, like people were selling them as.
Yeah, this chapter took me an eternity to write, because it's kind of a mindfuck of like the Spice Girls representing girl power and individuality through their spice, and that being present, and they really had such a message of like, be yourself, be an individual, like find your spice. But the spice names being assigned to them by a random, copy editor at like a British, it wasn't a tabloid, but they didn't even put their names. It just was like, look at this new band. This one's sporty. This one's baby. This one's scary. And so instead of rejecting that or feeling like defined by something that wasn't their choice, they almost took control of their own reduction and made it into what they wanted. And I thought that was interesting, because so often there's a lot of bigger things happening that we cannot combat, and women are easily put in boxes and defined by things they maybe don't want to be defined by. But while we can't like overthrow the entire patriarchy tomorrow, maybe there's some peace in just finding acceptance and ownership and assigning whatever value to those labels you want.
Yeah.
Instead of obsessing over their eradication.
So anyways, I want to remind people too, if you go to Be There in 5, Kate's going on the road with this book. We've got tour dates that you can go check out, Kate. You can go party, celebrate the release of this book. There's one in Anaheim that I'm going to try to go to, but I think this is a book worth purchasing, worth celebrating. I just want to tease you with one more thing that really meant something, and I think it'll mean something to you. Amidst your efforts to move the needle in this slow, painstaking process of transferring power, please go out of your way to honor your own pleasure. Like what you like, fangirl over it, shout it from the rooftops, take up space, then change your mind, stop liking it, rinse, repeat. And that was at the end of that book. I might have butchered a couple of those words, but I thought it was so very powerful and really is such a great expression. Kate, you're an explorer. I thought this book was brilliant. I was so excited to talk to you, and I hope this was good for you. And audience, I hope this actually intrigued you. If you do not know Kate, go listen to her podcast. It really, truly is magical, but also more importantly, go buy this book because there's a second book in Kate. Even though she probably is going to fight against it, we gotta hear everything. Are you still going to push your child to get into the arts and theater, like you said in the book?
You know what's funny is that I right before this, I was going through some of like the cut essays in case like I could ever write a second book. And you mentioned earlier, like you like to zone out and think about the Twilight Saga. And one of the chapters I cut is it was initially called Saved by the Bella Swan, and which turned into a different essay. And it's just this insanely, needlessly intense deep dive into like how Mormonism impacted the Twilight Saga, and like women like me were convinced that a controlling 105-year-old vampire like Edward was somehow romantic and not oppressive, and like it was just this. Anyways, I was rereading it and I was just like, I don't need to ruin everything. Like some things we just need to hold sacred. Like, for the love of God, I named my child Edward. Like, I can't put this in the book and people are like, what subliminal thing does it say that you're like dogging on Edward Cullen and named your son him?
You guys, there's only one sentence that I took umbrage with where I was like, you were like Jacob Black and Renesmee, an older generation imprinting on us at our young age, their worldview. And I was like, how dare you use imprinting with Jacob and Renesmee and talks of worldview? But I thought it was brilliant. Also, folks, I didn't even get to talk about this, talk about men and boy bands and how they set you up for lofty ambitions in terms of your own romance. Because if we met people in real life that actually said the things that boy bands say in their songs, it would actually be creepy. I thought that was brilliant as well. But we'll talk hopefully another time, Kate. I'm so excited for this, the book release, and I hope this goes excellent for you. You're amazing. Kate Kennedy, the book is One in a Millennial. Go get this today, and also keep checking out her podcast, Be There in 5. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey. God, you need a TV show. You're good.
Oh,
this is outstanding. Thank you so much for this interview.
Tell Courtney I said Courtney is her Kris Jenner, you guys. Courtney works with her, and she's one of the best. I mean, I've had a conversation with Courtney before, and she's truly mind-blowing. You surround yourself with really good people, and I take note of that. So thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you, Ryan.